she dreamed of him again. This time he stood under lantern light, his figure sharp against a river of flame-red blossoms. He did not speak, but his eyes told her he knew her. Not from this place, not from this time, but from something older, deeper, older than blood, older than the sky. His hand reached out. Her fingers stretched to meet his, and then she woke. The morning sun sliced across her cluttered apartment. Her sketchbook lay open on her chest, pencil still caught between her fingers. Another drawing, unconscious and precise, his face again. The lines always the same, the jaw that tensed in sorrow, the eyes that never seemed to smile, but always held a question. She didn't know his name, but in dreams she always called him mine. She was beginning to fear she was going mad. He had appeared every night for 3 months, every time in a different world. Once in armor and blood, once in a dusty alley with smoke curling behind him, once as a boy with a cut on his cheek and a bird in his hands. And in each dream he looked at her as if he had spent lifetimes searching. Some nights he died, some nights she did. But the one constant was the thread, thin glowing red, tied around her pinky, always tugging her forward, always leading her to him. She began to draw the thread. At first it was unconscious. A line here, a curve there. Then it became obsession. It spilled across her work, a crimson vein in every canvas. Clients praised her for the motif. They called it haunting. She called it unbearable. She tried to live normally. She tried to forget. But the thread never let go. In a corner of the city, among ivy-covered corridors and halls that smelled of old books and incense, she found something that made her stop breathing. It was a scroll, hand-painted, centuries old. It showed 2 figures standing at opposite ends of a broken bridge, their hands almost touching. Between them, a red thread stretched taut across the chasm. One wore robes that rippled like river water. The other, armor that gleamed like iron under moonlight. Above them, in bold characters, was a single phrase. Souls that search always find. Threads that tangle never break. She stared at the figures. They were her. And him. She didn't remember how she got home. She didn't remember opening the dozens of tabs on her laptop, each one diving into folklore and legends about the red thread of fate. But by morning, her entire wall was covered in printed articles, ancient woodcuts, translations of myths she never knew existed, all said the same thing. The red thread binds 2 people meant for each other. It may stretch fray, even not, but it never breaks. She laughed. It sounded hollow. If the thread never broke, why did she always wake alone? The dreams changed again. Now they didn't end in reunion. Now they ended in fire. Always fire. She stood in a collapsing temple, in a field of falling arrows, in a flooded alley, and each time she heard him call her name, Mei Lin, not Yuna. The name lingered even after she woke. She began to hear it in the rustle of wind, in the turning of pages, in the whisper of her paintbrush against canvas. Mei Lin, Mei Lin. She looked through old records, ancient manuscripts, and there she was, a poet, a painter, a rebel, a thief, a whisper, a martyr. Mei Lin lived 1,000 lives. In each one she loved him, and in each one she died. But now she remembered, and she wasn't the only one. She passed him on the street. She didn't know how she knew. But she stopped, turned. He did, too. Their eyes met. It was him, her stranger, her lover, her ghost. He looked as stunned as she felt, and between them, for one flickering second, the red thread glowed. Soft, barely there, but unmistakable. He took a step forward, then another. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Memories slammed into her like waves, a hand covered in blood, a final kiss under stars, a promise spoken beneath gallows, a child's laugh cut short by silence. She reached for his hand. They touched, and the world shook. The city melted away. Time unraveled. They were everywhere. Everywhen. A battlefield in the Tang dynasty, a bridge in Edo, a trench in France, a burning ship in Manila, a hospital room in Seoul, a plane spiraling over the ocean, a quiet alley in Tokyo. Their souls danced. Through centuries, through smoke and sand and snow and sky, each time they found each other. Each time the world punished them for it, they saw themselves fall. Again and again they saw the thread stretch, almost snap, but never break. Back in the street, hand in hand, they stood trembling. He spoke first. I remember. She couldn't speak. Her heart remembered more than her voice could say. He pulled something from his coat. An old coin, etched with symbols she knew too well. This, he said, was the only thing I had when they pulled me from the sea. I've kept it with me since I was 12. I never knew why. She took it, ran her finger over it, then looked at his hand. The red thread glowed brighter now. A choice rose between them, unspoken but immense. Let go. Forget, live a new life free of the weight of 1,000 deaths, or hold on, remember, and risk everything again. She didn't flinch. She tightened her grip and chose him. The thread pulsed like a heartbeat. Then it exploded. Light washed over them. The city disappeared. The air fractured. And for the first time, the cycle broke. No fire, no separation, no death, only stillness, only love, only eternity. And from somewhere far beyond the veil of space and time, a new thread began to weave.
Before we begin, a quick message. Any digital copy of this content is piracy. Don't do it and stand against it. For new stories, subscribe to the Story Nexus at youtube.com /Real Story Nexus. Don't go to fake Nexus. Want to know about upcoming stories? Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description.
The dreams began on the night of the lunar eclipse. Yuna Kisaragi didn't notice the full moon at first. She was too busy trying to meet an illustration deadline. Her coffee long since gone cold. The ash-grey night pressing against her studio, windows like a silent judgment. It was just another night, or so she believed. She had been sketching aimlessly, letting the pencil find its own way, when her hand froze, suspended halfway across the page. Her heart pounded inexplicably, as if her body had caught wind of something her mind had missed. And then she saw it, the thread, not on her hand yet, but on the page. Her pencil had drawn a glowing red cord, winding through a mass of swirling shapes. It looped and curled until it wrapped around a man's finger, his face still only half-formed. There was no reference, no commission, no explanation. And still, the image trembled with familiarity. She touched the paper gently, as though it might burn her, Then the power cut. Complete darkness swallowed the room. The only light came from the rising moon, washing her space in eerie silver. Outside, the city buzzed and blinked, neon lights hiccuping, digital billboards resetting. That's when she saw it. Her reflection in the studio window, barely visible in the moonlight, wasn't alone. A silhouette stood behind her, not moving, not breathing. She turned, heart slamming, but no one was there. Her studio was as silent as ever, except for the hum of something ancient, something deep beneath skin and floor and bone. When the lights returned, the thread on the paper had turned, darker as if dipped in blood. The man in the dream that night, he came to her. Not a blur this time, not a shadow, a man, tall, dressed in layered robes that shimmered with faded gold, his hair tied in the style of ancient warriors. He stood by a lake, under a sky so full of stars it made her breath catch. His eyes were dark storms, calm but charged, and he looked at her like she was someone he'd been waiting centuries to see. "You've come back," he whispered. She wanted to respond. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He reached out his hand. A thread glowed between them, crimson, alive, then flames. The lake burst into fire. The stars fell like arrows. He screamed her name, Mei Lin, and she awoke with tears on her cheeks and the taste of smoke in her throat. The drawings multiply. Over the next few days, her sketches changed. She couldn't help it. Her hands betrayed her. The man from the dream appeared again and again in her work. Not just his face, his eyes, his robes, his sword, his hands. The thread, too, always the thread. She stopped taking commissions. She ignored texts. She slept too little and dreamed too much. The dreams were clearer now. Sometimes she saw herself in armor, sometimes in silks. Once as a child, holding a broken flute, crying as fire consumed a village. And always the thread brought him to her. Across deserts, across cities, across time. Once she saw herself old and dying, the man still young, still unchanged, holding her hand. Once she saw herself killed in his place, leaping between him and a blade. Once he died in hers. She began to believe these weren't just dreams, they were memories de Kyoto. When the email arrived, she hesitated to open it. A scholar, it said, a researcher in Kyoto. He'd seen her work. He needed to speak with her. Something about ancient thread legends. The message was polite, professional, but she sensed something else behind it. A trembling urgency between the lines. She ignored it for 2 days until the dream changed again. This time she saw a train station in Kyoto, flooded with people. She was running, desperate, toward a man boarding a departing train. She knew she would be too late. She shouted. He turned, and she woke. That morning she took the train to Kyoto. Kyoto was colder than she expected. Yuna stepped off the train into a rush of wind and motion. The air here smelled different, older, quieter. As she walked through the station, she scanned the crowd almost instinctively. She wasn't looking for anyone in particular, yet part of her, the part that had begun to listen to the thread instead of logic, hoped she might see him. Not the man from her dreams. She didn't expect robes and swords, but maybe something in his eyes. A familiarity, a flicker. She found no one. The message had asked her to meet at a university library tucked near the old Xi'an district. The walk there was lined with stone paths and the kind of architecture that belonged to time more than city planners. It felt like walking through someone else's memory. As she passed beneath a crimson archway, she wondered if it had been his memory once, or hers. Ren Takahashi greeted her at the gate with a stiff nod. He was younger than she imagined. Early 30s perhaps, with sharp glasses and a weary precision to his movements, as though every gesture had been practiced until correct. His clothes were modern but neutral. He looked like he belonged to facts, not to stories, until he looked at her. His eyes flickered, just for a second, as if recognizing something he hadn't expected to. "Yuna-san?" he asked. She nodded. "Takahashi-san, thank you for reaching out. Please," he said, "call me Ren." They walked in silence through a narrow hallway until they reached a private archive. There were no windows here, only shelves lined with age and dust. He pulled out a file, thick with handwritten notes and faded photocopies. He set it down, opened it, and turned it toward her. The top page was a painting, not hers, older, brushed in ink and red dye. It depicted two figures, one male, one female, standing on opposite cliffs. Between them, a red thread danced across, the open air pulled taut by unseen hands. Yuna froze. "I've seen this," she said. He didn't look surprised. "You drew something almost identical," he said. "I saw it at your gallery showing 2 years ago. I've been trying to find you since." She blinked. "Why?" He took a breath. "Because I see them too. In dreams." Yuna's throat went dry. Ren continued, flipping the pages, names, dates, artifacts, poems, each connected by the same idea. Souls bound by a red thread across time. The legend, he explained, came from Chinese and Japanese myth. But what he had gathered went beyond folklore. It was a pattern. "This thread," he said, "appears in art from every century, and always with two figures, a woman and a man. Their roles changed, their names too, but the thread is constant." Yuna leaned in. Her fingers brushed one of the sketches. A girl in ceremonial robes, hand outstretched. The red thread curled like smoke around her arm. "That's me," she whispered. "Or it was." He looked at her carefully. "You remember?" "Not all of it, but enough." He pulled out the final page, a map of Kyoto, circled in red, an abandoned temple just outside the city. On the edge of the circle, a note in the margin, "Site of final separation." Yuna met his gaze. "Let's go," she said. They left the university without another word. Outside, the sky had begun to cloud. A thread of wind brushed against her hand. She didn't need to look. She knew the thread had started to glow. The road to the temple wound through a forest hushed with memory. Yuna walked beside Ren as the trees thickened and the sky above them narrowed into slits of grey between branches. The map he carried was worn and marked with faded characters, handed down from a professor who had dismissed the site as superstition. Ren had never believed it fully, until Yuna appeared, until the thread. They said little as they moved. Words felt too heavy, too blunt. The silence between them shimmered, alive with the unspoken weight of recognition. Though they had only met hours ago, it already felt as if they had known each other for centuries. Maybe they had. The temple revealed itself slowly, its stone, path veiled in moss. Broken statues of forgotten deities lined the overgrown walkway. Nature had begun reclaiming the shrine long ago, but something in the air suggested it had been waiting for them. The gate stood open. Yuna stepped through first. The courtyard was quiet, still. Stone lanterns leaned drunkenly into the undergrowth, and a great sakura tree stood at the center, bare, though not yet winter. Beneath it, a broken altar. On the altar, a piece of faded cloth, impossibly red despite the years. She didn't need to be told. Her feet moved on their own. She knelt before the altar and touched the cloth. Her breath caught. Vision surged. A girl, herself younger, in ceremonial robes, kneeling in the same spot. The air thick with incense. A man standing across from her, cloaked in armor, his hand trembling as he reached out. A voice speaking ancient vows. And then the crash of steel, screams, fire! She tore her hand away. Her body shook. Ren helped her stand. You saw it. The end, she said. Again. He nodded. Me too. They walked through the temple in silence, each step echoing across lifetimes. The structure itself seemed to breathe, sighing beneath their footsteps. In the back chamber, behind a crumbling wall, Ren found a panel marked with 2 names in brushstroke ink. Mei-Lin.Li Wei. Yuna touched the wall. The thread on her finger pulsed. Behind her, Ren reached up to the same place. When his hand met hers, the thread snapped taut between them, glowing fiercely for one perfect moment. And then the world changed. The temple was no longer in ruins. The sky was blue, clear. Bells rang in the distance. Servants bustled past the outer walls. The sakura tree was blooming. They had stepped into the past, together. The past wrapped around them like a cloak. Yuna stood in silence beneath the blooming sakura tree, its blossoms trembling as if in recognition. The scent of incense clung to the air, sweet and smoky. She turned slowly. Gone was the broken temple, the ruin. In its place stood pristine walls, new wood, banners bearing the crest of a noble house. She wore robes now, deep crimson with golden trim. Her hands, when she looked at them, were smoother, younger. She did not remember changing. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the eerie rightness of it all. Ren stood across the courtyard, and yet he was no longer Ren. He was Li Wei, and he knew it. The realization struck them at the same time. This was not a dream. This was memory. A fracture in time, or maybe a loop, a truth that had always been waiting beneath the surface. He approached her slowly, his movements sharper, more disciplined. His armor shone in the sun. He bowed low, the way a soldier might greet his betrothed. She answered with a smile she didn't recognize, one not from this life, but from another. It's really you, she said, Li Wei. His voice was quiet, reverent. Mei-Lin. He reached for her hand. The red thread bound their fingers again. Around them, life moved. The servants did not seem to see the change. The world accepted their return, without question. This was a living memory, one they had stepped into fully. Their past selves had returned to complete what once was broken. Mei Lin walked with him through the temple gardens, her steps guided not by thought, but instinct. They talked as if no time had passed. They spoke of war, of peace, of a planned union between houses, and of a coming storm. The city would fall soon, they knew, and with it their chance at a future. But still, they loved. They stole moments, lantern-lit walks, shared verses of poetry by the koi pond, secret touches in the shadowed corridors. He brought her plum wine wrapped in silks. She embroidered a sash for his armor with the symbol of the moon. And then the sky turned dark. They stood again at the altar beneath the sakura tree. She in ceremonial white, he in black armor. This was the day it ended. She felt it in her bones. Ida kissed her forehead. "This time we'll run, before the gates fall." But they were too late. A horn sounded in the distance. The sky burned red, and the thread pulled tight in warning. The horns did not stop. They echoed through the mountains, a haunting crescendo that bent the air and shook loose petals from the trees. The temple grounds stirred with panic. Servants ran with baskets of food and scrolls. Soldiers filled the gates. The air tasted of iron. Mei Lin stood at the threshold of the inner shrine, frozen. Her wedding robes, now dusted with ash, felt heavier by the second. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the jade hairpin Li Wei had gifted her that morning. Footsteps thundered behind her. Li Wei entered, his armor buckled, his face set like stone. "The eastern wall is breached," he said, voice low. "We have to leave. They'll follow us. Then we run faster." She nodded, but her eyes drifted back toward the altar, toward the place where they'd spoken their vows not an hour ago. A place already crumbling. Li Wei followed her gaze. "We'll come back," he said, "in another life, if we must." She turned, to him searching his face. "What if we never meet again?" He took her hand. The red thread shimmered like a flame between their fingers. "Then I'll search for you until I do." They fled into the woods as fire consumed the city behind them. Smoke chased them. Screams punctured the wind. Ash fell like snow. They ran until their legs gave out, until the world was silent again. But the thread never stopped glowing. In a clearing, far from the battle, they collapsed together side by side, blood and sweat painting their skin. She looked up at the stars, half shrouded by smoke. "This life is ending," she whispered. Li Wei said nothing. He only held her tighter. They kissed once more. And when the soldiers found them, blades drawn, they did not run. They died as they had, lived together, bound by the thread that even death could not sever. The cold was the first thing she felt, not the sharp cold of winter air, but something deeper, bone deep, old and flowing. Yuna gasped as her vision cleared. Her fingers clenched at the edge of a wooden boat, swaying gently on the surface of Earth's quiet river under moonlight. It took her several moments to realize she wasn't alone. Around her, dozens of small lanterns floated on the water, their flickering flames reflected in glassy ripples. Somewhere distant, bells rang, low and sorrowful. She looked down. Her robe was wet. Ink-black hair clung to her face. Her arms bore smears of soot, and in her lap, resting like a forgotten offering, lay a scroll sealed with red silk. Beside her, Ren stirred. He was breathing hard, blinking into the moonlight, just as confused. They looked at each other, and the moment their eyes met, memory surged. Not just the temple, not just Li Wei and Mei Lin. Another life, a girl in mourning, a rebel hiding in the mountains, a forbidden correspondence in ink that could cost them both their lives. Yuna's lips parted. "Sora," she whispered. Ren closed his eyes. "And Hana." The boat drifted along the canal, taking them deeper into the dream, or memory, that had pulled them. Kyoto no longer surrounded them. This was a different world, older, warmer, laced with danger. The year might have been 1868. Hana was a scribe, orphaned young, raised by a Buddhist temple near the banks of the Katsura River. Sora was the third son of a merchant-turned-underground courier for the pro-imperial movement. Their paths crossed in the most mundane of ways. He delivered supplies under the cover of temple donations. She recorded histories and copied edicts, but fate had different plans. Hana first saw Sora under a maple tree. He was quiet, eyes watching the clouds. He seemed like someone who belonged elsewhere, restless, searching. She didn't speak to him for days. Then one day, he left a note with the rice sacks. "Why do you always look at me like you've seen me in a dream?" She didn't answer. The next week he brought another message. "Even if you don't believe in fate, believe in this. When I look at you, I forget the war." And finally, she answered, "I don't believe in fate, but I do believe in the way my hands tremble after you leave." It was a dangerous time to love. Shogunate hunted rebels. The new government was barely holding the West. Anyone found exchanging sympathies or secrets risked execution. But they wrote each other every week, each letter folded in silk, slipped inside jars of rice or buried under temple tiles. Every word they wrote bound them tighter. They never kissed, not once. But when he was captured, betrayed by a rival faction, Hana ran. She found him in a prison camp, chained and bruised. They allowed her 10 minutes. She gave him one final letter. Read, "In this life I was too afraid. In the next I won't be, I promise." He smiled, even with blood on his teeth. "Then I'll wait, no matter how long." She died 3 days later. The temple burned, the rebels scattered, but the thread glowed even as the world turned to ash. Back in the boat, Yuna and Ren sat in silence. The river carried them forward, not just through water, but through time. Another life was calling. The river emptied into a sky of gold. Yuna and Ren stood on the threshold between water and fire, between memory and awakening. The current slowed, and the boat came to rest at the edge of a flooded field. A narrow footpath wound through fallen telephone poles and flickering lampposts. Beyond it, the ruins of a city, familiar but out of time. Yuna blinked. She smelled smoke, heard a plane overhead, felt dust on her tongue. This wasn't ancient history anymore. This was war. They moved through a marketplace half-gutted by shrapnel. Paper lanterns still clung to wires overhead, swaying gently in the wind. Burnt newspapers skittered across the broken pavement. The red thread between them stretched tight, guiding them forward. and then they saw her. A girl, no more than 16, standing beside a chalkboard sign. Her uniform was faded. Her satchel held pencils, books, paper cranes. Her name was Seoyeon. Inside the school, a boy waited, Jinwoo, an assistant teacher, slight, nervous, always clutching chalk like a sword. He knew poetry by heart. He had never held Seoyeon's hand. Yuna stepped closer. Ren did too. The world dimmed, and suddenly they were them. Seoyeon first noticed Jinwoo when he stayed behind to clean the hallways, humming a folk tune older than the war. She wasn't supposed to like him, not with her family's status, not with the city preparing for evacuations. But he made her laugh in silence and blush with glances. Their thread tightened with every shared glance. Each day he left a folded paper crane in her notebook. Each night she dreamed of fire. They talked only in writing, folded poems, coded lines. She wrote, "You are the silence between bomb sirens." He replied, "You are the string I tie to every breath." One morning she arrived early. He waited at the gate. After the exam, he said, "Meet me at the old observatory." She nodded. That was the day she would finally hold his hand. But the sky had other plans. At 11:02 a.m., the sirens didn't sound in time. Yuna felt the explosion before she saw it. Heat, light, silence, the world turned white. In the ruins of the observatory, beneath charred paper wings, Seoyeon and Jinwoo lay beneath the rubble. Their hands never touched, but the red thread burned on. In the present, Yuna dropped to her knees. Tears soaked the field where the school once stood. Ren stood behind her, silent. Grief lived in his bones now. Seoyeon and Jinwoo were gone. But something new stirred. In each broken life, the thread endured. And in that realization, something sacred cracked open in the sky. A door to the next memory. Snow covered the world in silence. Yuna stood beneath the steel arch of a train station, buried in frost. Her breath came in white plumes. All around her, the world was muted. Just shades of blue and grey. Somewhere beyond the platform, smoke curled from the chimney of a passing locomotive. Ren appeared beside her. Neither spoke. The thread between them glowed like a vein of fire in the snow. It tugged gently, leading them toward the waiting train. They stepped aboard. The windows were fogged. The seats cracked with cold. A conductor nodded, but his eyes were not for them. And then the memory returned. St. Petersburg, 1917. Revolution rippled through the city like wildfire beneath snowdrifts. Banners flapped over crumbling brick. The air buzzed with change, fear, and desperate hope. He was Victor, a railway engineer who coded letters for dissidents. She was Anya, the daughter of a Tsarist general who had abandoned her family's cause. For the workers' schools, their first meeting was over a hidden pamphlet, their second, over smuggled tea. Their third was silence. Too dangerous to speak, they shared no public words, only pages. A book passed back and forth, in which they wrote hidden messages. They met in shadows. They dreamed of summer. When the first shots rang out in February, Anya begged him to leave. "This city is no longer safe. We must flee." But Victor wouldn't run. Not while his comrades needed the tracks open, not while the world still needed building. So Anya stayed. They arranged to meet at the North Station. He would drive the engine. She would board with a new name, new papers. But that morning, soldiers took her from her dormitory, accused her of treason. She escaped, but not without injury. Bleeding and barefoot, she limped through the snow to the station. The whistle blew. She reached the platform just as the train pulled away. Victor saw her from the window. He climbed down. While it moved, leapt, rolled through snow. He ran to her. Bullets followed. They met for only a moment. Her in his arms, him with blood blooming in his coat. "We found each other again," he said. "Too late," she whispered. They collapsed together. The snow fell heavier, but the thread pulsed beneath it. In the present, Yuna reached out and held Ren's gloved hand. Their breath mingled in the cold. Another love lost. Another thread intact. The past was not done with them. The thread tightened, and the train pulled into darkness once more. The darkness gave way to golden light. Yuna stood barefoot in a sun-drenched field. Tall grass swayed against her legs. Dandelions scattered in the breeze like tiny stars trying to return to the sky. In the distance, a red-roofed house rested. Against a hill and near its porch, a child waited. The boy had a red kite tied to his wrist. Ren stepped beside her. They both knew what this was. Not war, not revolution, not ceremony, but something smaller, and somehow more painful. The boy's name was Tomo. The girl's was Mina. 2 children, neighbors, barefoot adventurers in a sleepy coastal town. They had no kingdoms to betray, no secrets to bury, just a summer of promises, a bond as light as laughter and as deep as the sea. Tomo believed the thread was real. He told Mina so the first day they met. She laughed and tied a red ribbon to his wrist. "You found me," she'd said. "They played hide-and-seek through the barley fields, sent letters in bottles, built towers from driftwood and shells. Every evening they would race the sun to the top of the hill and wait for stars. One day Mina brought a jar. 'I'm catching time,' she said, 'so we don't forget today.' Tomo had nodded solemnly. 'I'll keep it until we're old.' They made a pact. If they ever got lost, they'd meet again at the house on the hill. But life has ways of unmaking innocence. Tomo moved away that fall. His family left in a hurry. No goodbyes. A year later, Mina disappeared in a boating accident. No body was found, just her red ribbon, caught on a branch by the shore. Tomo waited at the hill every year, for 5 years, then 10, then 20. He built a small shrine where the jar had once been buried. Inside it, he left letters, hundreds of them, still looking, still waiting, still yours. When he died, they found him sitting by the shrine, a red thread tied to his wrist. Back in the field, Yuna stepped forward. The boy looked up. His face was soft, hopeful, too young to understand the ache in her eyes. But when she knelt and tied the ribbon to his finger, the boy smiled. "I knew you'd come back." The light swelled, and the thread began to glow brighter than it ever had. Before it was almost time. The hill faded behind them, and with it the field, the house, the sun. Yuna and Ren stood in a place between worlds. A void of shimmering red light surrounded them, threads weaving endlessly in every direction. Some threads stretched so far they vanished into infinity. Some were tangled, some looped around them like echoes. It was not a place of time, but of memory, of soul. Before them, a single thread floated. It was theirs. It pulsed softly, bright, trembling, tired. They followed it. With every step, images unfolded. Maylin's laughter in the temple garden, Sora's hidden poems, Seoyon's trembling, Han's, Victor's final smile, Mina's ribbon caught in the wind. Every life they had touched, every life they had lost. But they were here now, together, and this thread still held. A voice emerged, not from outside, but from within. Their voice, "You have remembered at last." The thread rose higher. "You have endured. You have chosen." Again and again. A final vision appeared. A city not from their past, but their future. Towering lights. Skies lined with hover trains. Gardens growing on rooftops. In that city, two figures met beneath a glowing street lamp. They smiled and walked on. Ren turned to Yuna. "This is our last choice. To forget." He shook his head. "No, to begin." The thread surged and wrapped them both. Light exploded, and then they stood on a quiet Tokyo street. No dreams, no visions, no memory, just a tug. Yuna turned a corner. Ren walked out of a bookstore. They collided, laughed, apologized, and when their eyes met, something shimmered, not recognition but belonging. Far above them, invisible to all but fate, the red thread tied. Two souls who had never truly been apart. This time they would not miss. This time they would live. And the thread would rest, for now.
And that's the end of today's story. But don't go anywhere because many more thrilling tales are coming your way. At the Story Nexus, we bring you the most exciting, mysterious, and unforgettable stories from around the world. If you love adventures, mysteries, and timeless legends, then hit that subscribe button now. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Join our growing community of story lovers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What story should we tell next? Want updates on upcoming stories? Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description. Thank you for watching and see you soon for another amazing adventure, only on the Story Nexus.